Minnesota is a state located near the heart of the massive North American continent. For that reason, it is at a crossroads for many different natural and human processes. Take this water, for example. That's heading to the Mississippi, to the Gulf of Mexico, the Atlantic Ocean. Of course, if I was in northern Minnesota, guess what? It's going to go all the way to Hudson Bay. Unless, of course, I'm over by Lake Superior, then it's going to go into Lake Superior and out through the St. Lawrence Seaway all the way to the Atlantic Ocean. Point being, Minnesota is one of the only two states, New York's the other one, that's got three continental divides. You pour water in any given place in Minnesota, hey man, you don't know where it's going to go. It could go to three different major huge bodies of water. Can't say that, Wisconsin. Minnesota is located at the far west end of the Great Lakes and the north end of the Mississippi River. Native Americans and early explorers spent a lot of time traveling through this critical middle ground in their trade and travels. Of course, it hasn't always been called Minnesota. The name comes from the Dakota people, meaning sky-tinted water. The Dakota are the original inhabitants of Minnesota, along with the Anishinaabe, otherwise known as the Ojibwe or Chippewa, as several other tribes. Minnesota has officially been a state for 154 years, but it didn't have that name for very long, back in 1858, when it first became a state. Check out this map made in the late 1760s. You can certainly tell where Minnesota is, thanks to the eastern quarters of the state, where Lake Superior and the Mississippi River define the borders. Northern and eastern Minnesota is part of an area known as the Chippewa Territories, while southern and western Minnesota are part of Natasau country and the Natasui of the Plains. Natasau is another name for the Sioux, otherwise known as the Dakota people. This map was made by explorer, writer, and self-educated mapmaker Jonathan Carver. He was exploring the lands newly given to England by the French, who were the first Europeans in our area as part of the fur trade. Other explorers to this area who made maps on their travels include Daniel Greysolon, Sieur de Lutte, Father Louis Hennepin, Henry Schoolcraft, and Joseph Nicolet. The United States officially became a country after the Revolutionary War in 1783. And at that time, the United States extended all the way to the Mississippi River, right here. Sun bright across there, but you get the point. The portion west of the Mississippi River, that shoreline over there, was controlled by numerous powerful Native American tribes and claimed by both the French and the Spanish. In 1803, the French sold their claim, over there, of 828,000 square miles to the United States in the Louisiana Purchase. This map, made 16 years after the Louisiana Purchase in 1819, shows no mention of Minnesota. The land east of the Mississippi is simply known as the Northwest Territories, and there's no dividing line between Minnesota, Wisconsin, and Michigan. The 49th parallel on the north was freshly made the northern boundary of the United States, from Lake of the Woods all the way to the Rocky Mountains. The land west of the Mississippi River is part of the massive Missouri Territory. This map was made the same year as the first permanent U.S. settlement to Minnesota as it was beginning to be built. What's it called? What's the name of that massive settlement right here in Minnesota? Well, it's Fort Snelling, of course, located at the confluence, or meeting place, of the Mississippi and Minnesota rivers. Today, it's the location of the Twin Cities of Minneapolis and St. Paul. Fast forward another 16 years to 1835, and there's still no such thing as Minnesota, or at least as we know it today. This map shows the territories of Michigan and Wisconsin as labeled by the United States government. Michigan was about to become a state, and Wisconsin went all the way to the Mississippi River. Land west of the river was to remain unsettled at the time. Here's another map made in 1838 showing the Wisconsin Territory. No Minnesota yet. Oh yeah, move ahead a few more years to 1844, and those lands west of the Mississippi are now called Iowa Territory. No Minnesota just yet. The shape of the state was coming around, however. Iowa became a state first in 1846, and its northern border was set. Wisconsin became a state in 1848, and its western border was set. In 1849, the U.S. Congress passed a bill creating the Minnesota Territory. Nobody around here knew about it until the next spring, however. News spread slowly back in those days, especially in the wintertime, and it wasn't until the ice left the Mississippi River and steamboats could travel up from New Orleans that the news reached the newly named territory. Only 5,000 people, not counting Native Americans, lived in the newly created Minnesota Territory at that time. As you can see, the Minnesota of 1850 was a bit bigger than the Minnesota of today, extending west into what's now North and South Dakota. In summary, the land that Salk Middle School sits on right here in Elk River has seen quite a lot over the years. Prior to 1492, this was all Dakota tribal land. While the Dakota retained control over the next 300 years, European powers, including the Spanish, French, and British, claimed this land to be theirs. In 1783, the land east of the river, where I'm standing right now, became part of the United States. Meanwhile, Otsego, where you can see behind me there, and all the other lands west of the Mississippi, remained part of France and Spain, disputed territory between those two countries. In 1803, the Louisiana Purchase of 828,000 square miles of land brought all that land here to be part of the United States. Even though the Anishinaabe and Dakota still retained control, treaties in 1825, 1837, and a few other years transferred control of all these lands to the United States. And while this land was part of Michigan, Wisconsin, Iowa, finally in 1858, on May 11th, it became known as the state of Minnesota with a population of over 150,000 people. But guess what? There was no such thing as Elk River just yet. It was known as Itasca back then. But we'll talk about that at another time. Thanks for watching, and now hopefully you understand a little bit more about how Minnesota became a state, how it got its name, and how it's changed over time.